Douglas, what are you doing? Come on, Douglas, what are you doing? A little switch here from my normal train videos. This is going to be on a Ticonderoga Cruiser, the CG47, a DML model, which you see the box top here. It's 1/350 scale. I built the model, but one thing I really enjoy doing is putting the actual ships in a seascape, and that's what we'll talk about here. So 1/350 scale is one of the more common scales for ship models. The other scale that's very common is 1/700 scale, but I find that way too small for me to work with. 1/350 is about as small as I want to go. Recently, we've seen 1/200 scale models of battleships and some stuff like that, but 1/350 is probably the most common that you'll see. This picture is the actual model, almost finished. I haven't put most of the guns on and some of the missile launchers, and I haven't done rigging and stuff. But the one thing that bothered me is that there was no photo etch with it, and there's no railings with it, so it was pretty plain looking. Here's another angle looking at the model, and as I showed you before, you can see where railings should go on it. The masts and stuff are kind of clunky. The radars and stuff are. I had a kit to do the whole model in photo etch and replace a lot of this, but this was really a practice model for me, so I wanted to get my skills back at this scale. And after getting it done, I decided to pull out a photo etch set that was kind of generic and pull the ladders and not the ladders, but the railings and stuff from that and install it on this. Photo etch is the process of burning an image on a brass sheet and then using a acid solution to melt away the areas around the image so you can have some very fine details. In this picture here, you can see some of the railings that are possible with this photo etch. And there's probably a little bit of insanity involved in this because this is very fine detail. You've got to bend it, then you've got to mount it on there with some kind of super glue or some kind of other type glue. And you're going to have patience to do this. I'll admit that. You have to have patience or else you don't want to be doing photo etch. So here I've put my finger into the picture so you can see the size of the ship and the size of this detail and see how tiny it really is. Here's a picture of it with the all of the photo etch completely added. You've got the safety nets around the flight deck and all the railings around the different ship levels. Normally you would add this before you paint a model, but I add it afterward. Next, let's talk about the tools and materials I use to make the natural water. This is specifically for ships, but a lot of these also apply to actually doing riverbeds and stuff. So I use packing styrofoam to embed the ships into the ocean scenes, and I do this because it gives you the ability to make the ship be at something other than a vertical axis, because ships at sea and rolling waves, they're never vertical straight. So I like this to give me that ability. This comes from packaging of products that get shipped to your house. I've collected this over the years and have quite the stockpile. I use a very sharp knife, and I have a sharpener with it because basically one or two cuts that will dull the knife and you have to keep sharpening it. But having this knife and you can do the base shape that you need to build the base up from. Another tool that's useful for this is a hot wire foam cutter. This should be done outside because this kind of foam does put off noxious fumes, but I didn't show that here because I just didn't feel like digging it out, but you can use that to do waveforms and stuff, and I'll show you that in a picture after this. I also use a T-square to give me straight cuts or right angle cuts when I'm cutting the foam out. For the base, I use hardwood, either oak or something like that. It's somewhat expensive, but it's worth it because it doesn't bend or flex after you start staining it and doing all the other things to put this together. And I use a glue like Gorilla Glue wood glue to actually glue layers of styrofoam together if I need that depth to get the waveforms. In this submarine diorama, I actually stacked the styrofoam and then used a hot wire cutter to actually cut these waves into it to give it the ocean effect of a pretty heavy sea. Now, this type of cutting of foam will also give you a lot of debris, and I always have a vacuum close at hand, and I usually have it running in between each cut to pick up those little pieces of white balls that come off the foam when you cut it and you're shaping it. This stuff has a lot of static electricity and it sticks you, but I mean, In the end result, it's something that's cheap, it's free, and it's easy to use. Next is the materials that I use to actually simulate the water. I use hobby paints or craft paints, which are on the left there. They are very inexpensive and come in a large variety of colors. The base color is always black because if you look in water, especially the ocean, it's really black when you look down on it. I do also use various shades of blue, especially when you have the wakes of ship and stuff like that. The water gets a very turquoise look to it, and I'll use those when I'm simulating that. I use paper towels or tissue paper to cover the styrofoam and also to put in some wave effects. Depending on the scale and how much of a raging sea I have, I can use this just to put a basic cover over it to give you some texture, or you can actually use this to create wakes and other larger wave forms. You'll need a large brush to spread the medium for the colors, whether it's Mod Podge or matte medium. The other thing is a small detail brush, and we'll talk about how you do the wakes and stuff like that. I use Mod Podge, the gloss version of it, to cover everything and use this for multiple layers to give actually depth to the view. The disadvantage is that it does bubble up and you have to go around and kind of pop bubbles after each layer, but it's cheaper than matte medium or gloss medium, so I use this for most of the products. I usually use a gloss medium for the final coat because it's more expensive, but it doesn't have the bubbling, and you can get a nice shiny coat without having to worry about bubbles or the remains of bubbles when you pop them. For creating wakes or for white caps and things like that, you will use cotton or cotton balls. The very first step is to actually apply the cloth or tissue paper to the top of the styrofoam, and then using your Mod Podge, and then paint it black. After using the Mod Podge to glue down the tissue paper or towels, and paint it black, I then start layering with the Mod Podge, and I'll put 6, 7, 8 layers on here. The good thing about that is it actually dries within an hour or two, and you can go back and do the next layer and the next layer and start building it up pretty quickly. I also will add color in between the layers to give it more depth. Once you have the base layers looking the way you want for the ocean surface, then you can start doing wakes and whitecaps, and this is done with the cotton. For this particular seascape, I ended up using, I think, one ball and just a little bit of another ball of cotton, so the cotton goes a long way. For the bow wave, I'll use some of the tissue paper to start building the bow wave, and then I'll use the cotton itself at the top of the bow wave to get that curl over. This takes a little bit of teasing and playing with the cotton and the glues and stuff like that. In the end, you're actually going to paint some of that too to get that color up to where just the actual crest of the wave is going off the bow. Here I'm adding the turbulence you get from the propellers of the ship, and this is actually the first application. When you see the final picture, there was actually another 2 layers put on top of this with the actual light coloring of paint. Here is the finished wake, and you can see the boiling look and also the lighter color of blue that happens because of all the foaming underneath the water's surface. At this point, I'll put some music on and let you look at examples of this ship and the final product, and then other ship ocean scenes I have put together. Again, same thing can be used. You can use this for water on railroading, and I'll show you that picture again of the Androscoggin River. But if you're interested in seeing how I actually do it, which means I actually film while I'm doing it, it's a rather lengthy process, but I can do that. Leave some comments and I will actually show you the steps.